In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Just making a video. Just some thoughts that I have on what is Christian religion in America, right? Like I'm saying, like what makes America a Christian nation, right? I know there is like the opposite of that. It's like, what does it make America a Christian nation? I'm sure that there are decent answers for both sides, but it is more about what is foundational to your country for its survival, right? It would favor more the Christian ethos than the secularist one, because the secularists, they seem to define the founders as theists, right? Even some Christians that I listen to, like this one guy, I think his name was Chris Pinto or something. Like his documentary is the one about America's true, like the faith of the true faith of the American founders, right? And he seems to appeal to, I don't know, like Masonry or something, or secret societies and stuff. It's more conspiratorial, to be honest. Like these founders were conspiring against Christianity, right? But in reality, it's just like, okay, but what is Christian, right? That has always been the question. What is Christian? Like, what is it? Is it really your dogmas? Because at the end of the day, the guy that is making that documentary, right, that made the documentary was a Protestant. And obviously, I mean, he's the same guy, I think, I can't remember if it was him, but well, basically their idea is that America was more holy when it was a puritanical America, right? Like a Protestant theocracy or something. Even though I don't believe that that is a blessed model, right? Because I see the main influencer, the reformer, right, John Calvin, like maybe there's good things and been bad things about him, but there's really the spirit of Calvinism that is not a good thing. Like I was arguing with this Baptist on his video because he had mirrored the video of that documentary, right? So I watched it a couple of times. I watched it before because I remember I watched it a long time ago, but it's like, it's not a very good documentary because it's just an interpretation. It's like, what is Christian will always be the question that I will ask, right, of all of these major traditions. And the only way you're going to be unified is based on principle and not on your dogmas. In fact, I argue that your dogmas are irreconcilable. That it is not possible for any church to be the church that unifies. Not even orthodoxy. No matter how hard you believe that is true, it is not true. And so this is why I look to the Republican founders, because I told you, like, this Protestant doesn't understand what is true Christian religion, and then they all turn to their sectarian dogmas. But we're talking about what is like what I'm talking about, like in America, what makes a Christian, in what sense is a Christian. And the theocrats and the secularists, they seem to agree that it is not Christian, and they're both going by the sectarian definitions, which means they're ignoring the Republican fathers. It's like if Constantine establishes his church, right, or his creed and his church for the church, right, a sort of creates a sort of Christian order or something, a religious order, like the Nicene Creed. I mean, to me it makes sense, because sectarianism benefits no one. And so it would make sense that he would have to, in a sense, create or conceive of a Christian religion that is consistent with Roman imperialism and his Roman monarchy, right? So you would have to define Christianity based on that founder, if God established him, right? And so that makes sense to me, because you don't want a Christian sect that does not believe in that form of government, because then that would cause problems. This is why I think it is a wise thing to do that, to say that, that Constantine did something like that, right? And so when it comes to America, right, I don't really listen to these sectarians, these sectarian Christians. When it comes to defining Christianity in America, right, I look to the Republican fathers about what they said, because I believe that the Constitutional Convention, right, those things and the Declaration, right? Like all of that is, as your founders have said, is provided by providence. It's a work of providence, right? That God has a hand in it. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I believe that is established by God. And so you would have to, in a sense, it would have to be dictated. True Christian religion is defined by the founders, but they don't define it based on sectarianism. They define it based on like principles, that which is consistent with the republic, right? And so this is why like I wanted to like just see if like it's kind of the quotations from this book, The Founders on Religion by James Hudson. Like, you can pick up this book if you want to. And it is a fair book. It goes over both the disagreements and agreements, right? On like the Bible, like it gives a fair assessment of both, right? Like Jefferson's criticisms on the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, right? Like John Adams speaking against the incarnate God dying, right? He finds that idea abhorrent, which is the incarnation, right? Or because of what is said about the incarnate God dying, right? Which is similar to what I say, because I don't believe in this and that kind of idea. Like, I don't think that is correct to say that the incarnate God died, even if you appeal to his human nature. Like, I've made plenty of videos on that, so I don't want to get into that. But like, I wanted to, I guess, I wanted to start on some of the quotations it has on the Constitution. This one from the Constitution of the United States. So the Constitution was made only for immoral religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. It's John Adams. I beg I may not be understood to infer that our General Convention was divinely inspired when it formed the new federal Constitution. Yet I must own I have so much faith in the general government of the world by Providence that I can hardly conceive a transaction of such momentous importance to the welfare of millions now existing, and to exist in the posterity of a great nation, should be suffered to pass without being in some degree influenced, guided, and governed by the omnipotent, omnipresent, and beneficent ruler, in whom all inferior spirits live and move and have their being. It's Benjamin Franklin. This one's from James Madison. He says, "Would it be wonderful if under the pressure of all these difficulties, the convention should have been forced into some deviations from that artificial structure and regular symmetry, which an abstract view of the subject might lead an ingenious theorist to bestow on a constitution planned in his closet or in his imagination. The real wonder is that so many difficulties should have been surmounted, and surmounted with a unanimity almost as unprecedented as it must have been unexpected. It is impossible for any man of candor to reflect on this circumstance without partaking of the astonishment. It is impossible for the man of pious reflection not to perceive in it a finger of the almighty hand, which has been so frequently and signally extended to our relief in the critical stages of revolution." James Madison. Many pious people with the name of the Supreme wish the name of the Supreme Being had been introduced somewhere in the new Constitution. Perhaps an acknowledgment may be made of his goodness or of his providence in the proposed amendments. Benjamin Rice, John Adams. We may, with a kind of grateful and pious exaltation, trace the finger of providence throughout those dark and mysterious events which first induced the states to appoint a general convention, and then led them one after another by such steps as it were best calculated to effect the object into and adopt of the system recommended by that general convention, thereby in all human probability laying a lasting foundation for tranquility and happiness, when we had but too much reason to fear that confusion and misery were rapidly coming upon us, that the same good providence may still continue to protect us and prevent us from dashing the cup of national felicity just as it had been lifted to our lips in the earnest prayer of my dear sir, your faithful friend, George Washington to Jonathan Turnbull. We have reason to rejoice in the prospect of that present national government, which, by the favor of divine providence, was formed by the common councils and peaceably established with the common consent of the people, will prove a blessing to every denomination of them. George Washington to the religious society called Quakers. I want to read some quotes on the American Revolution. Almighty God will look down upon your righteous contest. With the gracious approbation, you will be a band of brothers, cemented by the dearest ties and strengthened with inconceivable supplies of force and constancy by that sympathetic ardor which animates good men confederated in a good cause. Your honor and welfare will be, as they now are, most intimately concerned, and besides you are assigned by divine providence in the appointed order of things, the protectors of unborn ages, whose fate depends upon your virtue. John Dickinson's Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania. That's the inhabitants of the British colonies. The American Revolution was the grand operation which seemed to be assigned by the deity to the men of this age in our country. Patrick Henry to Henry Lee. In my endeavors to avert the evil with which this country was threatened by a deliberate plan of tyranny, should be crowned with the success that is wished, the praise is due to the grand architect of the universe who did not see fit to suffer his superstructures and justice to be subjected to the ambition of the princes of this world, or the rod of oppression in the hands of any power upon the earth. George Washington and Watson to Watson and Castle. The man must be bad indeed who can look upon the events of the American Revolution without feeling the warmest gratitude toward the great author of the universe, whose divine interposition was so frequently manifested in our behalf. George Washington to Samuel Lincoln. Upon the whole, nothing appears to me more manifest than that the separation of this country from Britain has been of God. For every step the British took to prevent served to accelerate it, which has generally been the case when men have undertaken to go in opposition to the course of Providence and to make war with the nature of things. John Witherspoon. This one's on Jesus. Jesus was, as you say, quote, the most benevolent being that ever appeared on earth, end quote. John Adams to Thomas Jefferson. It says, an incarnate God, an eternal, self-existent, omnipresent, omniscient author of this stupendous universe, suffering on a cross. My soul starts with horror at the idea, and it has stupefied the Christian world. It has been the source of almost all the corruptions of Christianity. John Adams to John Quincy Adams. Suffering Messiah known to the whole angelic host as lying in the Father's bosom from eternity, and as the great object of their love and adoration from their first existence, and who alone was capable of knowing and contemplating the divinity of his pure essence, and who had seen the Father being the express image of his person, and who thought it no robbery to claim an equality with God, this glorious being becoming an expiatory sacrifice and propitiatory victim for the sins of the world, magnified the law of God, demonstrated his infinite justice and loved being in general, and made it known to the universe when he declared, quote, that God so loved the world as to give his only begotten Son, that whoever should believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life, end quote. All this fully proved the infinite wisdom of the amazing plan designed to subdue all things to and keep them in their love, order, and obedience, discovering to man and angels, quote, the exceeding sinfulness of sin, end quote, and the awful consequences of it, even when the sacred humanity of the eternal Son of God was to be the victim as a substitute for the aggressor. This is Elias Boudinot. As to Jesus of Nazareth, my opinion of whom you particularly desire, I think the system of morals and his religion, as he left them to us, the best the world ever saw, or is likely to see, but I apprehend it has received various corrupting changes, and I have, with the most of the present dissenters in England, some doubts as to his divinity. though it is a question I do not dogmatize upon. Having neither studied it, I think it needless to busy myself with it now, when I expect soon an opportunity of knowing the truth with less trouble. Since that Franklin was 84 this time, since I see no harm, however, in its being believed, if that belief has the good consequence, as probably it has, of making its doctrines more respected and better observed. It's Benjamin Franklin to Ezra Stiles. This one's Thomas Jefferson to Joseph Priestley. His character and doctrines have received still greater injury from those who pretend to be his special disciples and who have disfigured and sophisticated his actions and precepts from views of personal interest, so as to induce the unthinking part of mankind to throw off the whole system in disgust, and to pass sentence as an impostor on the most innocent, the most benevolent, the most eloquent and sublime character that if ever had been exhibited to man. I am indeed sincerely attached to his doctrines, in preference to all others, ascribing to himself every human excellence, and believing he never claimed any other. Thomas Jefferson to Benjamin Rush. This one's a long one. This one's kind of long. From Thomas Jefferson. Syllabus of an estimate of the merit of the doctrines of Jesus compared with those of others. He says, in this state of things among the Jews, Jesus appeared. His parentage was obscure, his condition poor, his education null, his natural endowments great, his life correct and innocent. He was meek, benevolent, patient, firm, disinterested, and of sublime eloquence. The disadvantages under which his doctrines appeared are remarkable. This is one, like Socrates and Epictetus, he wrote nothing himself. Two, but he had not like them, like Xenophon or Arian, to write for him. On the contrary, all the learned of his country, entrenched in its power and riches, were opposed to him, lest his labors should undermine their advantages, and the committing to writing his life and doctrines fell on the most unlettered and ignorant of men, who wrote too from memory, and not till long after the transactions had passed. 3. According to the ordinary fate of those who attempt to enlighten and reform mankind, he fell an early victim to the jealousy and combination of the altar and the throne. At about 33 years of age, his reason having not yet attained the maximum of its energy, nor the course of his preaching, which was but about 3 years, presented occasions for developing a complete system of laws. 4. Hence the doctrines which he really delivered were defective as a whole, and fragments only of what he did deliver have come to us, mutilated, misstated, and often unintelligible. 5. They have been still more disfigured by the corruptions of schismatizing followers, who have found an interest in sophisticating and perverting the simple doctrines he taught, by engrafting on them the mysticism of a Rhaetian sophist, filtering them into subtleties and obscuring them with jargon until they have caused good men to reject the whole in disgust, and to view Jesus himself as an impostor. Notwithstanding these disadvantages, a system of morals is presented to us, which, if filled up in the true style and spirit of the rich fragments he left us, would be the most perfect and sublime that has ever been taught by man. The question of his being a member of the Godhead, or in direct communication with it, claimed for him by some of his followers and denied by others, is foreign to the present view, which is merely an estimate of the intrinsic merits of his doctrines. 1. He corrected the deism of the Jews, confirming them in their belief of only one God, and giving them juster notions of his attributes and government. 2. His moral doctrines relating to kindred and friends were more pure and perfect than those of the most correct of the philosophers, and generally more so than those of the Jews, and that they went far beyond, both inculcating universal philanthropy, not only to kindred and friends, to neighbors and countrymen, but to all mankind, gathering all into one family, under the bonds of love, charity, peace, common wants, and common aids. A development of this head will devise the peculiar superiority of the system of Jesus over all others. 3. The precepts of philosophy and the Hebrew code laid hold of actions only, He pushed his scrutinies into the heart of man, direct his tribunal in the region of his thoughts, and purified the waters at the fountainhead. 4. He taught emphatically the doctrine of a future state, which was either doubted or disbelieved by the Jews, and wielded it with efficacy as an important incentive supplementary to the other motives to moral conduct. That is Thomas Jefferson. This one's on the Hebrew people. Some other thoughts on them. Let me see. As much as I love and esteem and admire the Greeks, I believe the Hebrews have done more to enlighten and civilize the world. Moses did more than all their legislators and philosophers. This is John Adams, undated, Magnalia and Condorcet's Outlines of an Historical View of the Progress of Human Mind. May the same one, the working deity, who long since delivering the Hebrews from their Egyptian oppressors, and planted them in the promised land, whose providential agency has lately been conspicuous in establishing these United States as an independent nation, still continue to water them with the dews of heaven, and to make the inhabitants of every denomination participate in the temporal and spiritual blessings of that people whose God is Jehovah. George Washington to the Hebrew congregation. I was carried back to the ancient world and was led to contemplate the Passovers, the sacrifices, and the Jubilees, and other ceremonies of the Jewish Church. After this, I was led forward into futurity and anticipated the time foretold by the prophets, when this one beloved race of men shall again be restored to the divine favor, and when they shall unite with Christians with one heart and one voice, in celebrating the praises of a common and universal Savior. Benjamin Rush to Julia Rush. On morality. We know that I look upon religion as the most perfect system and the most awful sanction of morality. From Adams to Abigail Adams. There is no such thing, morality, without a supposition of a God. There is no right or wrong in the universe without the supposition of a moral government and an intellectual and moral governor. John Adams, marginal note. In Condorcet's Outlines of an Historical View of Progress of the Human Mind. Religion I hold to be essential to morals. I never read of any religious character in Greek or Roman history, nor in any other history, nor have I known one in my life who was not a rascal. Name one if you can, living or dead. John Adams to Benjamin Rush. No point of faith is so plain as the morality is our duty. For all sides agree in that a virtuous heretic shall be saved before a wicked Christian. Benjamin Franklin. A dialogue between two Presbyterians. Can we, in prudence, suppose that national morality can be maintained in exclusion of religious principles? Does it not require the aid of a generally received and divinely authoritative religion? Alexander Hamilton, Draft of Washington Farewell Address. He who made us would have been a pitiful bungler if he had made the rules of our moral conduct a matter of science. For one man of science, there are dozens who are not with what would have been of them. Man was destined for society, his morality therefore was to be formed to his object. He was endowed with his sense of right and wrong, merely relative to this. The sense is as much as part of his nature as the sense of hearing, seeing, feeling. It is the true foundation of morality. The moral sense or conscience is as much as part of a man as his leg or arm. It is given to all human beings in a stronger or weaker degree as force of members is given them in a greater or less degree. It may be strengthened by exercise as may any particular limb or of the body. This sense is submitted indeed in some degree to the guidance of reason, but it is the small stock which is required for this, even a less one than what we call common sense. State of a moral case to a plowman and a professor, the former will decide all well as well, and often better than the latter, because he has not been led astray by artificial rules. Thomas Jefferson to Peter Carr. As to myself, my religious readings has long been confined to the moral branch of religion, which is the same in all religions. while in the branch which consists of dogmas, all have a different set. The former instructs us how to live well and worthily in society. The latter are made to interest our minds in the support of the teachers who inculcate them. Hence, for one sermon on a moral subject, you hear 10 on the dogmas of the sect. Thomas Jefferson to Thomas Laper. It's not an exhaustive book on quotations, right? I guess it grabs the ones that are the most reliable, like, because there are other quotations, right? That had to do with Christianity, the Bible, things like that I don't think are in this book, but I've seen them online, right? Christianity, this section. Like, just basically, what did they say about Christianity? It's not in how do you say it? It's not an exhaustive book on quotations. Like, I'm sure there are some that could have been used but are left out. But anyway, like, I just want to see if this, like, because the secularists always say that they did not speak of Christianity, or they always give bad paraphrasing and very misleading. Like, they'll quote as they defined it under sectarianism, which is when which would be its most corrupt form, right? Its corruptions. But they also speak of it in the sense of in its most primitive form, which is its most purest, before the Christian religion got all crazy with the creeds and stuff, and the sectarianism. So they rooted basically in the source, God, the Bible, and Christ. And they basically speak a lot about the simple faith when it was the more simple precepts. So I just kind of wanted to read these quotes to give an idea of what did they mean by Christianity. Like if America were to be defined as a Christian nation, it would have to be defined based on principle, not dogma. So the nation to me has biblical presuppositions, like covenantal, biblical, presuppositions, even principles, even reformed principles, but not reformed dogma. So principles of Christian Reformation, covenantalism, and scriptural. And so let me see, here it says, every Tyrol knows that even philosophy and Jewish ceremonies have been intermixed with Christianity. But what then? Christianity has been corrupted. What then? What has not? That's John Adams' marginal note on Bolingbroke's essay concerning authority in matters of religion. Right? That is basically it's like what hasn't been corrupted. Right? Everything has to have gone through some kind of controversy or something. And so then it's like, what else he says? Like here, I think this one's pretty good. It says John Adams to Abigail Adams. It says, my religion, is not exactly conformable to that of the greatest part of the Christian world. It excludes superstition, but with all the superstition that attends it, I think the Christian the best that is or has been. So that's John Adams, right? There's a lot of founders that are like that, But that to me, it just shows that they are not anti-Christian or anti-Bible, even in their most, severe criticisms of Christ, not of Christ, of the Christian religion, because of the many irreconcilable sectarians and the denominations, and also like the Bible, whether they believe it to be infallible or whatever. Like at the end of the day, it is not like it is basically like I would say it is not anti-Christian. Like they still favor the Christian religion, the Christian tradition. This is why, based upon the books that I've read, right, that I've recommended to you as well. Like I see them as being pro-Christian tradition, even pro-God, pro-Bible. I guess what they want is the freedom to disagree, right? Because you don't technically have to subscribe to all of their views on what their opinions are about the divinity of Jesus or the Bible. It's like theirs is more based on principle, and it is meant for the life of the Republic. As Washington spoke of religion and morality being essential pillars of the Republic. and you can say they're two sides of the same coin, right? Basically, a type of religious morality, or even Christian morality, right? True Christian morality. Because the Bible certainly still plays a role, even if, like the Jefferson says, he separates the diamonds from the dunghills. But at the end of the day, they're involved with the Bible's involved, right? And so they don't exclude it. Even up until the Civil War, right, with Lincoln and the Confederates and stuff like that, or the Union and the Confederates, the Bible always has been a major part, or foundational to the American ethos and the soul and spirit of America. It's like, to me, like literally to ascribe all of that, the American ethos, to secularism, right, is to ascribe to Caesar what is God's, which is blasphemous, I would agree. Like even Caesar, what is his is God's, because the footstool, like earth is his footstool. And when Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and what is God's, I mean, it still comes from Jesus being someone who believes in God, right? And so it's never purely secular or godless in a sense, but secular in the sense of temporal. I mean, that's what secular has always meant in the Christian understanding, is a temporal realm, right? Not a godless, because there's no such thing as a godless space or something, if I could say that. But yeah, basically, yeah, even in the Bible it says that God removes kings and establishes them. So whatever is Caesar's, it's only permitted to him because of God, right? This is why, because God is above Caesar, we obey Caesar, right? But in the end, we always obey God. Otherwise, obviously, you cannot. It is permissible to disobey, right? If that authority, like, I guess, wants you to commit blasphemies against God or something, right? That's why I see in the book of Daniel when he resisted the king, right? Things like that. Because in the end, yeah, you obey because of good conduct, right? Civil governments and things like that, rulers. But ultimately, it's because you're obedient to God, because God said to do that. But it's like, I'm pretty sure it's like consistent with the Bible, how Daniel resisted worshiping an idol as that king wanted, right? Because he knew it was blasphemous towards God, so he wouldn't do it. And so that is why he is saved from the fire, right? But it is actually the obedience to God that counts, not to a king, right? So I think that's kind of how I approach it from principle, like the spirit of the law. So anyway, like here, John Adams. Like the reason why I'm reading these quotes is because I believe it ties into both the pursuit of happiness and the vision for true Christian religion, according to the Republican founders. And so that any like principle, like the liberty of conscience, or sacred right of conscience, right, liberty of religious liberty and things like that, it is really grounded in God or true religion, because these are principles of true religion, right? Because without them, you cannot practice true religion. It would be like, basically just be force and violence, which is the source of bad religion and false religion. And so you cannot practice true religion or keep the spirit of the law without the principles of liberty of conscience and religious liberty. If it is dictated or presupposed by the true God, then you know that what is presupposed is true worship, right? Like Madison said, right? It is done through conviction and reason, right? Conversion. That way the spirit in worship is true and right, right? Like it is based on truth and spirit of, I'm sorry, I'm tired. That's like, worship is done in truth and in spirit, right? Through reason and conviction, as true conversion should be, right? Because I was reading from like the other book, The Jesus Wars, and in that book I remember reading something about like in the Christian Empire, like ever since the Chalcedonians and the Monophysites split, the Monophysites were like, I think there's this one guy who was a Chalcedonian, and these Monophysites basically used force and violence to get him to repent of his beliefs, right, in Chalcedon. And then they forced him to partake of their liturgy, the Monophysite liturgy. So they basically had a man partaking of liturgy, violating his consciousness, because they did not convince this guy that what they believed was true. And so they did it by force and violence, which is a forced uniformity. It's like, what is the point of this man's worship, right? what is the point of this man's worship? Or what is the point of him worshiping if he does not believe the words of the liturgy or believe the form of like worship in that sense, right? Like it's not enough to just have the right form of worship, the right liturgy. You have to do worship in the right spirit, which is the spirit of God, right? To be the spirit of God. And so that's why it's like the principle of religious liberty. It should not count as a secular liberty. It should count as a godly principle. Like, would your founders favor you interpreting the country through a godless ethos, a purely godless secularist ethos? Of course not. There's plenty of sayings here from your own founders that they favored religion and morality. They go together. That is the key to good government. But it is not just any religion. Obviously, you see these woke people. They are a type of religious people because of the wokeness they believe in. It comes from the Marxism, right? And so that is a type of spirituality. And so it's like weird how I see like secularist atheists like James Lindsay, right? Who I appreciate. But it's like weird to see him having to, I mean, it makes sense. How he has to take off his secular mentality, his mindset, and he has to put on a biblical mindset, a biblical consciousness, in order to combat wokeness, because that stuff is a spiritual enemy. And so this is why I believe the nation of America, right, being grounded in a biblical ethos, as your founders are clearly favoring, right? It seems like they just want, if it's based on true Christian religion, then you could disagree, right? You could agree to disagree instead of having to resort to demonization and persecution, right? Which is not of God. And so you have to be able to disagree, you know. And so I think that the biblical ethos favors the American nation as a whole. Like, to me, it's like, even if you counted these men as theists, based upon these things that I've read, right, like, they would still favor the Christian order over a secular theistic one. In fact, why do secularists interpret the founders as theists? Why do they want that to be true? Because they know that what they mean by deism has tendencies towards atheism, kind of like the French revolutionaries. A lot of deists, and I think they were humanists, but they were like atheists, right? Atheistic. And so that's why they favor interpreting the founders under deism. But I told you that cannot possibly be what the founders favored, because the founders favor practice and true religion, religious morality, and not anything like deism, which seems to favor God, but lack of religion, which is not what the founders envisioned. This is why the Christian providential God, creator God, nature's God, revelation God, covenantal God, what else? There's so many ways like to describe this God, and yet it be the same God that they're describing. For like, I don't know, like they still seem to have God involved in government or something, or to some degree, but based on principle, like the constitutional morality. Yeah, a God of divine judgment. Remember, they spoke a lot about divine judgment. Yeah, all that is basically describing the Christian God, but I guess they want to keep it in a non-sectarian way, because it's based on principle. And then, like I was saying, he said that the Christian religion was intended to give peace of mind to its disciples in all cases whatsoever, but not to send civil or political peace upon earth, but a sword. And a sword it has sent, and peace of mind to the millions, by conquering death and taking away his sting. John Adams to Benjamin Rush. There's a lot of John Adams quotes in here. It says, in the heavenly doctrines of Christianity, reduced to its primitive simplicity, you and I agree as well, I believe, as any two Christians in the world. John Adams to Francis van der Kamp. The Christian is the religion of the heart, but the heart is deceitful above all things, and unless controlled by the dominion of the head, will lead to us into salt ponds. John Adams to Benjamin Waterhouse. This is from John Dickinson, Religious Instructions for Youth. He says, Christianity is an active, affectionate, and social religion, chiefly consisting in a discharge of duties to our fellow creatures. It therefore requires no separation from them, so enjoining that we, quote, be not conformed to this world, to the world. Unquote. In following this direction, the utmost attention is necessary, lest distinctions from others, by plainness of manners and customs assumed the place of virtues, and become snares. Such distinctions are not in the least value in themselves, because they are no part of the divine laws. That was John Dickinson. And Benjamin Franklin says history will also afford frequent opportunities of showing the excellency of the Christian religion above all others, ancient or modern. That is Benjamin Franklin proposals relating to the education of youth in Pennsylvania. And then there's a lot of them in this section. So. Obviously, as Thomas Jefferson to Charles Thompson when he says, "I'm a real Christian," but he's saying in the sense of disciples the doctrines of Jesus, which is very different from the Platonists. They call them infidels and themselves Christians. And it's that quote when it says all that. I read this one before. Basically, it's saying that it basically is the quote where he has problems with the Christian dogmas, right? How they draw their characteristics from the dogmas, from what its author never said nor saw. They have compounded from the heathen mysteries a system beyond the comprehension of man, at which the great reformer of the vicious ethics and theism of the Jews, were he to return on earth, would not recognize the feature. And that's to Charles Thompson by Thomas Jefferson. And so they basically are trying to avoid schismatic dogmas and trying to ground the principles of the Christian religion in the constitutional morality. I guess how I would presuppose it. Because it's meant to be a religious constitution. Yeah, it does presuppose God and religion. Like, it is a religious constitution. It does have a section dealing with the Constitution. Try to work my way there. And Thomas Jefferson, he says, "Our Savior did not come into this world to save metaphysicians only. His doctrines are leveled to the simplest understandings, and it is only by banishing hierophantic mysteries and scholastic subtleties, which they have nicknamed Christianity, and getting back to the plain and unsophisticated precepts of Christ, that we become real Christians." Thomas Jefferson to Samuel Hale. So there's a lot of emphasis on principles there, which ties to moral principles, right? Religious morality, the principles of religious morality, of true religion, right? Of true Christian religion, if you want to specify, because they all have a Christian background. And even Jefferson, was an Episcopalian, he had gone back to that church later on in life. And throughout his life, he contributed to the Trinitarian churches. In fact, he contributed to all of them, right? Even if he had disagreements. But that's what I'm saying, is about the right to disagree. Because Jefferson, right, he did not impose his beliefs of Jesus, right? Stuff that he said in his private correspondence to John Adams and stuff. He did not impose his Jesus upon anyone. No one had to accept the Jesus, what he believed about Jesus, right? It was mainly his opinions or so. But nevertheless, he still contributed to the Christian tradition, which is my point. He's involved with the Bible, right? Involved with Christian tradition, and this shows that basically that these are not anti-Christian conspirators like that guy was saying in his video. You know what I mean? It's at the end of the day, it's what is the true vision of God for America? Is it to be a failed Protestant theocracy, or is it to be God's republic, right? His new covenant republic or something. You know what I mean? It's if he established a constitutional order, then And that is what you have to have faith in. That God established that. That is what you should be faithful to, and not be turning to all of these other ideas. Like, everyone's coming out to try to be the savior of the country or the world, right? Like, turning to like all sorts of things like monarchy, communism, theocracy, and it's like, no, have faith in what God established with you and your Republican founders. In fact, the main reason you're in this turmoil is because you are not faithful to that. So it require an interpretation, it require a Christian religion that is consistent with what your founders desired, right? The kind of Christian religion that is consistent with American republicanism. That's why I use I'm trying to read this book to see how to use the Bible that is consistent with American liberty or American republicanism. Because you could say the Bible is more than a Republican book. That's how they define it, right? Like that's how they see it. That's how they see it in the American ethos or something. You could say it's like an American book, only because of how foundational it was to the American consciousness, soul, spirit, the idea of the American Israel or the chosen nation, all of these things, right? God providing or providence, right? Establishing you. And I don't believe all that is coincidence. And then, what's some other ones? Like here it says, had the doctrines of Jesus been preached always as purely as they came from his lips, the whole civilized world would now have been Christian. Thomas Jefferson. Says, I am looking with anxiety to see the dawn of primitive Christianity here. Or if it once appears, it will soon beam like the rising sun and restore reason to her day. Quote, thy kingdom come, end quote, is therefore my prayer, and my confidence that it will come. Thomas Jefferson to Benjamin Waterhouse. That's why I say that consciousness and reason, it comes from God. It's just why I say it should not be interpreted based on anything other. And it certainly comes from the biblical God. This is what, because they do, like Washington and John Adams, even Benjamin Franklin, I think at one point, I don't think I saw it in this book, but in this book it clearly shows you, they do name this God, right? Jehovah God. It is the same God of the Bible, the Jews, the God of Christ, the God of the Christians. They do flat out tell you that that is the God of the Republic, as they speak of this God's hand in the Revolutionary War. So there's only one God that established this country. Therefore, it cannot be this idea that it can be anyone's God. So now the anthropology could be totally inconsistent. So you would literally have people who work in government who do not believe in this one God, therefore misinterpret the constitutional order. Is it possible to have people work in government without religious tests, but have them be consistent with the American traditional order, right? The natural law tradition, how they do natural rights, respecting the limitations of all that, right? I'm not an expert on all that, but I'm pretty sure there is presuppositions to our Constitution and Declaration, and it is not as a secular say. It is anyone's God, and how you define what is religion, right? Which is another problem that I have with some of these secularists. Even James Lindsay, who said, religion is for you to make for yourself, right? Or something like that. And it's not true, because you're having to fight against woke people. They are also a religious people, right? People whose religion says it's okay to use force and coercion to convert you, or religions that do not believe that you have a sacred right to your own conscience, right? Or something like that. And so truly, America's God cannot be anyone's God, and why should it be? It's ridiculous. The whole problem is the sectarian Christians. And so this is why I said, in order to unify you, you would have to look at your Republican fathers. What did they say about true Christian religion? Is it not follow that if Providence established them and the constitutional order, your declaration, that you should, determine, shouldn't they get the right to determine the Christian order or the religious order? Why you should not look to Constantine and Nicaea? Because we are not his empire. He is not our founder. And so I told you, it's you could say that America is like the offspring of the Church of Rome or something, a son of Rome or a child of Rome, because of the reformers. Like, America is mainly founded upon the Reformed Church, which came from the Roman Catholics. It was the Church of the Roman Empire. I mean, just ideas, you don't have to agree. But it's just because you people just don't agree. And the danger of, like, defining it based on dogma, Christianity, I mean, it's dangerous, because what if your dogma is false? That means your whole religion is disproven. That's why I say, shouldn't we stick to the doctrines of Christ, or have the freedom to discover them or something? Like, be more unified, not on your dogmas that are going to fail, but unified on the Spirit of God, the Spirit of the kingdom, right? Isn't it about the kingdom of the gospel kingdom, right? The triumphant king, the covenant, the Spirit of God, right? Aren't there other positions we could be unified or something? And so, this one's James Madison. He says, the best and purest religion, the Christian religion itself. This is James Madison to Jasper Adams. This is Benjamin Rush, A Defense of the Use of the Bible as a School Book. Christianity, he says, Christianity is the only true and perfect religion, and that in proportion as mankind adopts its principles and obeys its precepts, they will be wise and happy. As far as the Bible being a school book, this is a quote from there. That's the thing, though, it's like, maybe if you wanted to avoid theocracy, then you would have to, stop ignoring the Bible, and you would have to define Christianity, and your founders are clearly showing you how to do that for the Republic, which means you could have biblical symbolisms and, display like the Ten Commandments, even use the Bible, have it involved in some way in the social order, but in a way that is consistent with American republicanism. Because I told you, the Bible is foundational to the heart and soul, the heritage of America. Like, I hear all these, holidays that they have during the month, all these heritage, but none of them mention the Christian one. And I think it's because you need to avoid religion. But your founders are clearly telling you that religion is essential for your republic, and so it cannot be avoided. And I told you, it's like, I think it is a total misunderstanding. Like, what is God's is more important. Everything is God's. Like I said, even what is Caesar's is only permitted to Caesar, right? What is Caesar's is only permitted by God. And so now the idea is that secularism is not godless, and should not be defined as godless. I say, what does the wall separate? It's like they're like looking at the wall, how tall it is, how tall to make it impenetrable, but at the same time, it's like, what does the wall stand on? Like Jefferson's wall. See what I mean? It's like it stands on the biblical presuppositions, a biblical foundation. Like, I did buy books on how secularism can be or is a biblical principle, right? Sacred right of conscience, liberty of conscience, things like that. I mean, the Bible, like the Hebrew Bible specifically, it does have that in there. It's kind of like, I got some new books. This one is secularism. Yeah, secularism, biblical secularity. It's like a collection of essays, but it's like an orange cover and stuff. But it has it on Kindle for free. You can pick it up or so, if you have Kindle. Let's see. Benjamin Rush, he says, in spreading the blessings of liberty and religion, our Divine Master forbids us in many of his parables and precepts to have either friends or country. The globe is the native country, and the whole human race the fellow citizens of a Christian. That's Benjamin Rush, and then down here it says, this one is a veneration for the religion of a people who profess and call themselves Christian, and a fixed resolution to consider in decent respect A decent respect for Christianity among the best recommendations for public service. This is John Adams' inaugural address. It says, Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and perfect and prefer Christian for their rulers. John Jay to John Murray Jr. Yeah, but the thing I disagree though, like, you see a lot of these politicians, they claim to be Christian, but they're not. They're not in practice, right? So that's why I said it's about the principle, like a Christ-like people, right? So is it really you can call it a Christian principle, but it's really a principle of God's kingdom, right? An eternal kingdom. But it is more important that that Christian or whoever that works in government is faithful to the constitutional morality and tradition, right? I just believe that it has biblical presuppositions, like religious presuppositions that are more specifically biblical religion. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that the country, right, the republic, does have biblical presuppositions, even covenantal principles, right? That, like in that one book, Dressback was talking about how the Bible covenantalism ties into it, like its inspiration of American constitutionalism. The inspiration from that is a major role that played a part in that is the Bible, right? Like, I'm sorry I'm incoherent right now. I'm just tired. Here's Church and State. There's a lot of quotes from different people, mainly Thomas Jefferson, then James Madison, John Dickinson, John Adams. This one, I read this one from John Dickinson, writing over the signature AB, Pennsylvania Journal. And he says, religion and government are certainly very different things, instituted for different ends, the design of one being to promote our temporal happiness, the design of the other is to procure the favor of God and thereby the salvation of our souls. While these are kept distinct and apart, the peace and welfare of society is preserved, and the ends of both are answered. By mixing them together, feuds, animosities, and persecutions have been raised, which have deluged the world in blood and disgraced human nature. That was John Dickinson. This one's Thomas Jefferson, a bill for establishing religious freedom. This is the impious presumption of legislators and rulers, civil as well as celestial, who being themselves but fallible and uninspired men, have assumed dominion over the faith of others, setting up their own opinions and modes of thinking as the only true and infallible, and as such endeavoring to impose them on others, have established and maintained false religions over the greatest part of the world, and throughout all time, that to compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves in the poorest is sinful and tyrannical, that the opinions of men are not the object of civil government, nor under its jurisdiction, that to suffer the civil magistrate to intrude his powers into the field of opinion and to restrain the profession of propagation of principles on the supposition of their ill tendency is a dangerous fallacy, which at once destroys all religious liberty. That is time enough for the rightful purposes of civil government for its officers to interfere when principles break out into overt acts against peace and good order. Thomas Jefferson. Another quote from Thomas Jefferson. He talks about how the opinions of the fallible man, right? It says here, like, I'll read part of it. It says, this is fallible man governed by bad passions, by private as well as public reasons, and why subject it to coercion to produce uniformity. But is uniformity desirable? No more than face and stature. Is uniformity attainable? Millions of innocent men and women and children since the introduction of Christianity have been burnt, tortured, fined, imprisoned, yet we have not advanced 1 inch towards uniformity. Thomas Jefferson, Notes on State of Virginia. It makes sense to me. Like if, looking at the disputes, right, in church history, like they create creeds and they don't actually deal with the problem. Like it's more of an artificial unity because it's just meant to deal with it for its time. But especially the Christological controversies and things like that, or I guess adding things to the liturgy. Right? I mean, even the bishops and stuff can be politically motivated, right? And how even the emperor, there's always the case of a shadow emperor. But people who influence the emperor in order to change things in the liturgy and to put their theology in there and then have everyone forced to conform to that, to sing this theology, even though no one is really convinced that it's true, right? Or understand it. So that would be maybe some of the dangers of uniformity. But I would agree, maybe, it's not entirely bad. But I don't know, this is what I say one of the negatives about it. Let me see. Says, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, which declare that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of eternal separation between church and state. This is Thomas Jefferson to the letter of Danbury Baptist, right, Association. Even though it's not in the Constitution, right, separation, but this whole statement is built on the principle of a religious principle, of religious liberty. That is the whole point of the separation. The wall is for the purpose of religious liberty, which is the actual constitutional right, not separation. And so religious liberty is grounded in God, because that's where liberty comes from, just like the consciousness. So this should not be interpreted as favoring godless theism or irreligious theism or any kind of tendency towards atheism. It's you're supposed to interpret that as based on the principle of, religious liberty, which is a religious principle, is a godly principle. Without it, you cannot practice true religion. And this is in matters of religion, I have considered that its free exercise is placed by the Constitution independent of the powers of the general government. So the Constitution is independent of the powers of the general government. I have therefore undertaken on no occasion to prescribe the religious exercises suited to it, but have left them as the Constitution found them, under the direction and discipline of state or church authorities, acknowledged by the several religious societies. That's Thomas Jefferson, Second Inaugural Address. That's what I'm saying, the free exercise, right? But again, it's based on true religion, which is always consistent with constitutional morality. That is grounded on the principles of true Christian religion, of true biblical religion, which is based on the spirit of the law and not the letter. The whole point of the letter is the spirit. Without the spirit, you don't keep the letter at all. What is the spirit of the law? Love thy God, love thy neighbor as yourself, right? Because there is such a thing as bad religion, like I told you, as you see, right, with the history, even with Christianity, because of its corruptions. False praise of bad religion, but it's based on the sectarianism, the dogmas, rather than if it's true to its principles of God's kingdom or so, of Christ, the doctrines of Christ, right? Which I think have to do with principle, because Jesus says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Go and figure out what that means. But it also says that God says, come, let us reason together. So how would you understand what it means if you don't go to God, right? And let me see. This one's from James Madison. It's kind of lengthy. It's a little bit lengthy. And okay, but it says, we maintain, therefore, that in matters of religion, no man's right is abridged by the institution of civil society, and that religion is wholly exempt from its cognizance. The bill implies either that the civil magistrate is a competent judge of religious truth, or that he may employ religion as an engine of civil policy. The first is an arrogant pretension falsified by the contradictory opinions of rulers in all ages and throughout the world. The second, an unhallowed perversion of the means of salvation. To say that is a contradiction to the Christian religion itself. For every page of it disavows the dependence on the powers of this world. It is a contradiction to fact. For it is known that this religion both existed and flourished, not only without the support of human laws, but in spite of every opposition from them, and not only during the period of miraculous aid, but long after it had been left to its own evidence and the ordinary care of providence. During almost 15 centuries has the legal establishment of Christianity been on trial. What have been its fruits, more or less, in all places pride and indolence in the clergy, ignorance and servility in the laity, in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution. Inquire of the teachers of Christianity for the ages in which it appeared, and in its greatest lustre. Those of every sect point to the ages prior to its incorporation with civil society. James Madison, Memorial and Remonstrance. As I say, it says a lot about Christian religion, its principles, and also the other form, like what I'm saying, how they describe Christian religion in two different senses. One is being sectarian in its most corrupt, basically its most corrupt form. Its corrupt form is corruptions, is the sectarian Christian religion. And the other Christian religion, they define it based on the primitive form, like I said, they're based on principles and things like that. And so that is telling you a lot about what their vision is, what they say about Christian religion. That if America is a Christian nation, it would be based on these principles. It would be seen in this way. That is not depending on the religious dogma. That the religious dogma is meant between you and your God, and it's like you can have disputes or whatever as long as you agree to disagree or something. This one's also from James Madison. It said there remains in others American states a strong bias towards the old error, that without some sort of alliance or coalition between government and religion, neither can be duly supported. Such indeed is the tendency to such a coalition, and such is the corrupting influence on both parties, that the danger cannot be too carefully guarded against. Every new and successful example, therefore, of a perfect separation between celestial and civil matters. It is of importance, and I have no doubt that every new example will succeed, as every past one has done, in showing that religion and government will both exist in greater purity, the less they are mixed together. I cannot speak particularly of any of the cases excepting that of Virginia, for it is impossible to deny that religion prevails with more zeal and a more exemplary priesthood than it ever did when established and patronized by public authority. We are teaching the world that great truth, and that governments do better without kings and nobles than with them. Merit will be doubled by the other lesson, that religion flourishes in greater purity without than with the aid of government. James Madison to Edward Livingston. Obviously, the only way to keep the constitutional order, right, is through true religion, right? People who who are not faithful to the constitutional morality and things like that, right? Whether religious or not, but one who don't practice true religion is most likely not to keep the constitutional morality, which is supposed to be presupposing the religious principles. Whatever is maintained as like being separate is the sectarian divisions. It's like people losing their right to their own property because they, I don't know, hold to a dogma or something. Right? That could be one of the main things. I remember reading that could be worth talking about. One of the main things I was reading, how some people because they're heretics, they lose their right to their property and they're exiled or something. And so that's why I said a lot of times they would keep dogma in order to maintain their status in the church or something, or in the civil order or something. At least from what I can comprehend, He says, I must admit, moreover, but it may not be easy in every possible case to trace the line of separation between the rights of religion and the civil authority with such distinctness as to avoid collisions and doubts on unessential points. The tendency to a usurpation on one side and on the other, or to a corrupting coalition or alliance between them, will be best guarded against by an entire abstinence of the government from interference in any way whatever, beyond the necessity of preserving public order and protecting each sect against trespasses on its legal rights by others. James Madison to Jasper Adams. Benjamin Rush to Richard Price. He says, in the United States we view your religious establishment with horror, and the man who would attempt to defend it, publicly or privately, would be consigned to a physician instead of a casuist or politician to be cured of his error. So that's Benjamin Rush to Richard Price. This one's Benjamin Rush to Thomas Jefferson. He says, were it possible for St. Paul to rise from his grave at the present juncture, he would say that the clergy who are now so active in settling the political affairs of the world, quote, cease from your political labors, your kingdom is not of this world. Read my epistles, as no part of them will you perceive me aiming to dispose a pagan emperor or to place a Christian upon a throne. Christianity disdains to receive support from human governments. From this it derives its preeminence over all the religions that ever have or ever shall exist in the world. Human governments may receive support from Christianity, but they must be only from the love of justice and peace which it is calculated to produce in the minds of men. By promoting these and all other Christian virtues, by your precepts and examples, you will much sooner overthrow errors of all kinds and establish our pure and holy nation in the world than by aiming to produce by your preaching or pamphlets any change in the political state of mankind. End quote. A certain Dr. Owens, an eminent minister of the gospel among the dissenters in England, and a sincere friend of liberty, was once complained of by one of Cromwell's time-serving priests, quote, that he did not preach to the times, end quote, my business and duty, end quote, that the disciples of St. Paul, quote, is to preach to eternity, not to the times, end quote. Benjamin Rush to Thomas Jefferson. Let's see. Here's on the clergy. Yeah, because like at the end of the day, none of these men are secularists in a godless sense, favoring irreligion, right? So I understand why like people may think that they want nothing to do with religion, but I just showed you like religion is an essential like pillar of the republic. Its constitutionalism is grounded in religious principles. It is a religious constitution. And that's why I say the presupposition of what counts when interpreting these kind of things. Like here John Adams says to John Quincy Adams, all religions have something good in them, but the ambition and avarice of priests and politicians have introduced into all of them monstrous corruptions and abuses, and led into none more cruel, bloody, and horrible than into the Christian. It says, in every country and every age, the priest has been hostile to liberty. He is always in alliance with the despot, debating his abuses in return for protection to his own. It is easier to acquire wealth and power by this combination than by deserving them. And to effect this, they have perverted the purest religion ever preached to man into mystery and jargon, unintelligible to all mankind, and therefore the safer engine for their purposes. Thomas Jefferson to Horatio Spafford. This other one is it says another one from Thomas Jefferson to Horatio Spafford. He says, you judge truly that I am not afraid of the priests. They have tried upon me all their various batteries of pious whining, hypocritical canting, lying, and slandering, without being able to give me one moment of pain. I have contemplated their order from the Magi of the East and to the saints of the West, and I have found no difference of character, but of more or less caution in proportion to the information or ignorance of those on whom their interested duperies were to be played off. Thomas Jefferson again to Ezra Stiles says, "No doctrine of his, Jesus, led to schism. It is the speculations of crazy theologists which have made a babble of a religion, the most moral and sublime ever preached to man, and inculcated to heal and not to create differences. The religious animosities I impute to those who call themselves his ministers, and who engraft their casuistries on the stock of his simple precepts. I am sometimes more angry with them than authorized by the blessed charities which he preached." This is the section on God, some of the founders and their quotes. And this one is from John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. He says, "God has infinite wisdom, goodness, and power. He created the universe. His duration is eternal, a parte ante and a parte post. His presence is as extensive as space. What is space? An infinite spherical vacuum. He created this speck of dirt in the human species for his glory, and with the deliberate design of making 9/10 of our species miserable forever for his glory. This is the doctrine of Christian theologians in general. 10-1. Now, my friend, can prophecies or miracles convince you or me that infinite benevolence, wisdom, and power created and preserves for a time innumerable millions to make them miserable forever for his own glory? Wretch, what is this glory? Is he ambitious? Does he want promotion? Is he vain, tickled with adulation, exulting and triumphing in his power and the sweetness of his vengeance? Pardon me, my Maker, for these awful questions. My answer to them is always ready. I believe no such things. My adoration of the author of the universe is too profound and too sincere. The love of God and his creation, delight, joy, triumph, exultation in my own existence, though but an atom, a molecule, organic, in the universe, are my religion. How snare by to ye Calvinistic, ye and the nation divines, if you will. You will say, I am no Christian. I say, ye are no Christians, and there the account is balanced. Yet I believe all the honest men among you are Christians in my sense of the word. There has been long, very long, a settled opinion in my mind that there is now, never will be, and never was but one being who can understand the universe, and that it is not only vain but wicked for insects to pretend to comprehend it." This says, "But what do we mean by the ideas, the thoughts, the reason, the intelligence, or the speech of God? His intelligence is a subject too vast, too incomprehensible for Plato, Philo, Paul, or Peter, Jews, Gentiles, or Christians. Let us adore, not presume, nor dogmatize. Even the great teacher may not reveal this subject. There never was, is not, and never will be more. Never will be more than one being in the universe capable of comprehending it. At least this is the humble, adoring opinion of the writer of this note. Moses says God spoke the world into being. He said, quote, let there be light, and quote, and there was light. Plato and Philo seem to teach that God thought the world into existence, which is the most sublime, which the most incomprehensible. But if God's idea was of itself almighty and produced a world, the world must be eternal because God must have had an idea of it from eternity. These are all the effects of great minds grasping at ideas too vast for their comprehension. The will of God must come into consideration. Moses seems to have understood it best. God had the idea from eternity. At length he willed the existence of the world, expressed his will by a word, and that it was done. The world existed and stood fast, thinking or willing a world into existing is as sublime as speaking it. A thought is more simple than a word, but these are incoherent, and these are incorrect figures to express inadequate ideas. Admire and adore the author of the telescopic universe. Love and esteem the work. Do all in your power to lessen ill and increase good, but never assume to comprehend. This is John Adams' Marginalia and Joseph Priestley's early opinions concerning Christ. And this one's from Elias Bodinot. God governs the world, and all things must be right and just. Another one from Elias Bodinot. It says, our God has provided us hitherto in the same yesterday, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His hand is not shortened, but is yet mighty to save. It's Elias Bodinot to James Milner. And John Dickinson, he says, God is a spirit from everlasting to everlasting, alone, self-existent, invisible, unchangeable, infinitely powerful, wise, just, true, merciful, good, holy, who by his word created all things and preserves, governs, and disposes of them according to his will. This one is Thomas Jefferson Tedder Stiles. The benevolent, sublime reformer of that religion, Jesus, has told us only that God is good and perfect, but has not defined him, and therefore of his theology, believing that we have neither words nor ideas adequate to that definition, and if we could all, after his example, leave the subject as undefinable, we should all be of one sect, doers of good and eschewers of evil. No doctrines of his led to schisms. I think I'll stop there. There's a bunch of topics that you could read about in this book. The founders on religion, and just reading it to kind of give you like the nature of the founding, its ethos, like the reality, right? The consciousness and soul of the American reality, and that saying that it's basically just saying that it's perfectly within the foundation. It's how the Bible involved, whether you have disagreement with it or not, or even to disagree about dogma. So what is Christian? I'm just trying to show you, like, what did the Republican founders say? I mean, there's just plenty of other quotes that I could have read, but I think that's sufficient for now. Plus I'm tired, but anyway. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.